Hey y'all, it's Andrew with Free Tours by Foot New Orleans. Today I'm going to take you on a walk down historic St. Charles Avenue. This is one of the most beautiful streets in New Orleans, runs from the edge of the French Quarter, along the edge of the Garden District, and through Uptown New Orleans. Today we're going to do the middle section of it, that runs from Louisiana Avenue on the edge of the Garden District, ultimately down to the Crescent City Connection Bridge, right at the edge of downtown, near the French Quarter. So this is going to be big, impressive historic houses, lots of beautiful trees, oodles of streetcars, and we will see what other surprises. So drop a like for us, subscribe for more videos like this, let us know down in the comments what other walks you'd like to see, and if you'd like to tip your guide, you'll find the means to do so down below. Here we go. And we begin. We are starting the walk from St. Charles and Louisiana, right here. And I have already been chatted up by a guy who wondered if I had seen an electric motorcycle before. So this is the border of the Garden District on this right side over here. This is part of St. Charles Avenue that goes along it. Mostly it's not a street for very large businesses, but this is an exception. We got the Fresh Market over here, and even it is very much St. Charles Avenue style version. This is a building made up of 3 buildings consolidated into one, and it used to serve as a funeral home, then a bookstore, and then a grocery store. I was gonna say, if you took this route by foot, you'd be more likely to get chatted up by strangers than if you ride it, but I don't know that that is actually true. I have been chatted up by strangers on the streetcar many a time, so that is a strong likelihood too. So this whole section of the Garden District, you wouldn't really know when you're coming or going from it. It sort of technically extends, depending how you're counting, from right here or from the intersection behind us, straight up ahead to Jackson Avenue. So not a super long walk. It's a small neighborhood. Mostly we will leave that to be its own tour. But tell you what, I will show you one of the big celebrity Garden District houses because it's one that's a little out of the way. Normally we don't get to tie it into other things. It is a beautiful late afternoon. The sun low enough behind me that once in a while you'll see my shadow. Oh, 2 streetcars going by within a 5-minute span. Someone's on time today. So, our celebrity house that we'll visit, here on the right, it is located on Harmony Street, which is going to turn out to be appropriate, as you'll see in a moment. So have the one A-frame house on the street back behind the trees here, but that is not the one. Also, a thing that you should know about New Orleans, and maybe about most of the South. Nobody stops for crosswalks. So, one thing the Garden District is known for, of course, is some of the pretty famous people who live here. And by and large, they're all clustered pretty close together. So it makes it easy during a typical Garden District walking tour to check them all out. But this one would be the exception. It's a little further flung than the rest of them in a part of the neighborhood that's generally pretty quiet, but what a standout it is. So this beautiful monstrosity here is the property of Beyonce and Jay Z, hence Harmony Street. I'm sure the street was named before the house, but time travel may have been involved. And this originally was built as a church and then becomes a ballet and music studio. So it has a pretty varied and elaborate and kind of bohemian history. Pretty appropriate little find. And it goes most of the way through the block, so it's pretty huge. Anyway, notice the complete absence of tourists. We are getting y'all some things that most people don't see. These walls could talk, y'all. Haven't had any sightings myself, but the neighbors and their security cameras no doubt have. It is mid-April right now, and the jasmine is in bloom. And this stuff just fills the air this time of the year. Get a better peek at our unusual little bit of modern architecture here. Not a lot of this on St. Charles, but here and there. Thanks for a little palate cleanser. On the opposite side of the street, we have the Elms Mansion, much more traditional St. Charles Avenue affair. And this is the former home of the German consulate up until the beginning of World War II. And the German consul at the time was eager to serve the German cause. He's keeping an eye on ship movements out of the Gulf of Mexico. So, I picture some flaming documents being dropped out of windows as the U.S. entered the war. It's also an event venue today. It's all the covered area here. It's been a very rainy couple of weeks in New Orleans, but weddings must go on. A lot of the traditional look, this won't be a surprise to probably anybody, but it's a very classical atmosphere, and that lines up with the fact that a lot of these folks were plantation owners or part of the plantation economy, so there are all kinds of shared elements with plantation architecture. And that goes not just for the houses, but for the long rows of live oak trees on either side of the road. Plantation houses tended to have the oak alley leading up to the door. So particularly luxuriant streets in town do the same thing. This jasmine got it on maybe the best day. Another big difference between this part of town, Garden District in particular, and the French Quarter and other parts, is the tendency toward less Catholicism, more Protestantism. And this, Christ Church Cathedral, is actually a Protestant, not building, but a Protestant congregation going back to 1805. They had the first Protestant church in the city down on Canal Street, and the first Protestant cemetery in the city too. That is a whole story unto itself. More on that during a cemetery tour sometime, but suffice to say, it is underneath a Superdome parking lot. They've got their little free library. What do you get from an Episcopalian church's little free library? Some science fiction, very well read. I think that's some of what you'd see in just about every little free library. And some Nora Roberts. Yeah, all right. par for the course. We're pretty close to where Garden District tours usually meet up. We're in the middle of the neighborhood. Gracious Bakery over here is actually one of the spots where you see people getting together sometimes. And they have survived through these strange times so far, so, wow, huh. And I don't know how to explain this, but a little piece of collage art. Seriously, y'all, there is a surprise to be found every single time. Streetcars are out in force today. Since the whole Garden District, y'all, dates from the 1830s, it is appropriate that the streetcar, which is the way a lot of people see it, does too. This route goes back to 1835. It's an electric route today. It used to be a steam engine. And there is not a single structure in the neighborhood that goes back that far, so it really is the oldest thing that's still around. A few houses from just a few years later than that, though. I don't know if y'all saw our Mardi Gras videos, but there was a lot of thought when we had the float house tradition arise this year that surely this is going to last into other holidays. Well, mainly we were thinking other Mardi Gras, but other holidays too. And sure enough, it's going on already. Y'all can see what those look like during Mardi Gras. There were certainly a lot more of them then. If you check out those other videos, right? 2801 over there is one of the ones we stopped by on our House Floats tour. It was Easter themed, and they've still got just a few of the flowers on. So this is Washington Avenue. This is where generally you would jump off the streetcar to go meet a Garden District tour. Ours and a great many others convene just a single block over there. So for a lot of people, this is as far along the streetcar route as they ever go. And there's a lot of cool stuff too. I mean, it's a great stretch just to get this far, but there's a lot of beautiful stuff further along. So we will be doing a walk, ultimately, that incorporates those other parts further uptown. A lot of this same kind of stuff, although the houses are a little bit younger. By young, I mean like 1880s instead of 1850s. Not a difference that's going to worry an awful lot of people. Y'all also may know, this is the part of the street where Mardi Gras parades roll. So on the power lines or the streetcar cables above us, and in the branches of the trees, you can see some Mardi Gras beads hanging down. The supply of them did not get renewed this year like it usually does. Generally every year you have parade floats rolling right over there, stocking the trees back up. And lots of tents and barbecues and whatnot going on here in the middle. The streetcar does not run during that time. Bus runs in place of it over there, and even it has a pretty hard time getting around. So just camping out on this track for a while is kind of the norm for a lot of folks. For a few weeks in late winter. Across the way is the formerly known as the Belfort Mansion. If you ever watched The Real World New Orleans, one of the early reality shows, that is the building where that was set. Before many of the Hollywood folks moved into the neighborhood, so a little bit of foreshadowing there. Mardi Gras parades being a fixture of the neighborhood, one of the fixtures among all the Mardi Gras parades is the Crew of Rex parade. Rex is one of the older parades that still exists. Uses a kind of classic 19th century style of float design. And they would do a little zigzag in their route, step over to this side of the road for a minute to pass by a house on this site and raise a toast because it was the home of an original Rex member going all the way back to the 19th century founding of the thing. Today, there is no house standing there. There was a big fire in 2019 that took this place down, and family still seems to be pondering what to do with it. Huge loss of property, but no loss of life from this. Strange thing to see with the streets so densely built besides. What would normally be a kind of unremarkable little plaque, as house plaques go. They're all wonderful, but it's not such a standout. But when you see a phrase like the only remaining home of a former Rex on the parade route, it is it's sad to see that contradicted. When they say a former Rex, Rex is both the name of the parade and it's also the title of the person who serves as its king every year. Rex means king in Latin. And so the person who the Crew of Rex chooses, which is generally a society fella, is the sort of quote-unquote king of Mardi Gras for the year. And the other many Mardi Gras parades are all like, cool, you can be that. So to this day, there continue to be Rexes. But their membership is a who's who going back a mighty long time. I've walked most of the Garden District now. You really wouldn't know, looking to either side of the street, that it was two separate neighborhoods. This side pretty quickly leads over into Central City, which is a much more working class neighborhood. But St. Charles itself doesn't really show any difference. I've seen some great roller skaters out on St. Charles today. Trend alert. Oh y'all, this is the best version, maybe not the best version for the trees, but the best version from just a spectacle standpoint. That is Jasmine climbing up a pole and then dangling from a live oak tree and just drenching the neighborhood with its scent. Restraint is not our way in the Garden District, and the plants have learned that. onto a block. It looks like any other, but actually several of the houses on this block and buildings on the opposite face of it too are part of the Louise McGee School. You can see the banners indicating that. They moved into a Garden District mansion back in 1912. And have gradually taken over the surrounding space since. So if you're walking along St. Charles Avenue and you spot a little playground between a couple of these houses, you will know what you're seeing. Oh, walked right by. Over there, the corner house, just a childhood home of Anne Rice. She's one of the better known names from the neighborhood. She's got put her name on a lot of different spots in the neighborhood, so most Garden District tours will talk about her at some point, but again, like the Beyonce house, this one's a little outside the geographical reach of most of those walks, so that's not one that you'd see very often. She also set stories up and down this whole stretch, so when you read her books, this is an excellent bit of geography to have in mind. If you don't know Anne Rice, she's the one behind Interview with the Vampire and lots and other vampire novels, and just in general the idea that New Orleans and vampires go together. This one, y'all, actually this is a destination worth knowing about, depending on what your tastes are. This one with the awning over here, the House of Brohl. So it's not named, as most of these are, for a historic resident, although one day she will be. This is named for Bonnie Brohl, the current proprietor. And it's an event venue part-time, but I think the real highlight is you actually can privately book a tour here and see Ms. Brohl's pretty incredible dollhouse collection. I've done it. It is a one-of-a-kind experience. There used to be a different hotel at this spot, y'all, and so Jackson Avenue here, not only a boundary of the Garden District, depending on who you ask. Definitely once you cross the street, you're outside of it. But it's also the route for one of the Mardi Gras parades that runs a little less traditional of a course, which is the Zulu Parade. Crew Zulu is the first all-black float parade. And so they turn here, they go through Central City, a largely today mostly black neighborhood, and then turn onto St. Charles and go down into the Treme. Way back when I was a college student, there used to be a taller wall around that hotel, and I was a resident advisor in a dorm, and the most exhausting time of the year was Mardi Gras because you had to try to impose some level of order, which Mardi Gras is just not made for. And after a pretty exhausting couple days without sleeping in the name of imposing order on Mardi Gras, I went out into Audubon Park, I slept in a tree for a few hours, and then I biked downtown, climbed up on that wall, and watched the Zulu Parade. Because I did not feel able to stand in a crowd of people, but somehow climb the wall was okay. Anyway, beginning with that one, this starts to be the stretch of places that you can stay, though we've passed some bed and breakfasts back there too. Maybe most notable among them, the Hotel Pontchartrain up here. This is definitely one of the places you'd read about if you check out the works of Anne Rice. And for the literarily inclined, even if Anne Rice isn't your speed, they have a rooftop bar called Hot Tin, a reference to Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, the Tennessee Williams play. And it's kind of designed as a artist loft. It's a pretty grandiose artist loft. I've never seen an artist with that much space, but it has a rooftop view out over the whole downtown area, and you can see the shape of the city. So, very worthwhile spot to visit. Also pretty fascinating, and often overlooked, Eiffel Society. So this place is up for lease right now, and it's that is in line with its history. So the name of this place is actually pretty appropriate. This was a restaurant that was built onto the Eiffel Tower, the real one, and it should not have been. It was too heavy. The structure couldn't bear it, and so they removed it and they shipped it here in 1984. So we could install it as part of the 1984 World's Fair that we hosted in New Orleans. And it was a similar event that the Eiffel Tower got built for a century prior to that. So it would have been a nice little centennial to stick the landing of. As it was, they didn't manage to get that place online. It was a French restaurant originally, but it didn't manage to open until a couple years later. So much for the serendipity. And the place died pretty fast. And that has been yet another event venue until pretty recently. Looks like what it is now is an opportunity. So this place has been a revolving door of different restaurant concepts for a while, largely under the leadership of Al Copeland, who is a self-made New Orleans businessman. He's the guy behind Popeye's Chicken, but has other restaurant endeavors too. And he and Anne Rice had a bit of a feud over that turf that led to a legal battle, slander or libel, I forget which one. I think it was slander. Anne Rice is a writer, less of a speaker. She won, if that was going to keep you awake tonight. Cute little logo for an old movers company. Mama cat carrying a child, if you can't make it out. A cat child, not a human child. Y'all can see the bend in the street up ahead, depending on which of these you've seen before or what you just know about New Orleans from other sources. We're not the only people who talk about New Orleans. The bends in St. Charles Avenue are very historical little geography markers. So this whole strip through Uptown, like the rest of the city, used to be plantations. And because the Mississippi River moves in a bend, crescent shape, they were called the Crescent City, all of the plantations were wedge-shaped and they tapered from one another. So the roads that ran between them had to bend every time they crossed from one property to another. So these streets, these intersections with St. Charles, where you have a bend suddenly telling you that approximately there you're crossing between plantations of a bygone time. One of these up here used to be owned by the Ursuline nuns. The oldest building in the French Quarter probably is the Ursuline convent. So the nuns were big property owners. Y'all count the streetcars. I have, when I wanted to catch a streetcar, walked this stretch without seeing a single one, so this is a remarkable day. Anyway, the nuns signed off their property to private developers to let this be turned into residences, and this street got named after the nun who signed the documents, Felicity. And it's still a granite brick road. I would say follow the granite brick road, but know where you're going before you stroll on Felicity Street. There's a plaque that has seen better days, but a very important concept for this part of the city, Higgins Boats. So, Higgins Boats are a really important part of the story of World War II. And if you've ever wondered why New Orleans is home to the World War II Museum, Higgins Boats are the reason why. So, these are the boats used in the Normandy invasion, the D-Day invasion, and the fact that it was a beach landing meant that the same kind of craft that you'd use to go through a swamp in very shallow water were also very well suited to that need. And so Andrew Higgins, the guy who ultimately designed the Higgins Boats and produced massive numbers of them here on that site back there, is the guy behind basically making the D-Day invasion possible. And so the museum began as the D-Day Museum and then added exhibits until it became something much, much bigger. Y'all, we haven't talked about bars, but the Avenue Pub over here, this place, possibly the best beer selection in the city. Competitive, if not necessarily all the way there. Couldn't tell you for absolutely sure, but they're up there. And y'all can see also incredible food menu, so come hungry. This Save Our Bars thing, it's a really clever idea that's going on right now. So y'all can imagine in the course of the year that we have had, it is April 2021, the year and change that we have had, bars are not in a super safe place right now. And so the crew of Red Beans, who were the brilliant minds behind an organization called Hire a Mardi Gras Artist, which was about keeping float designers in business by group fundraising and getting them to turn houses into what we call house floats. They were one of several organizations behind making house floats happen, but they were the ones who most actively channeled those resources towards Mardi Gras professionals. So smart people, and they are themselves a Mardi Gras group. They parade in red bean and other bean and rice decorated jackets and cars and whatnot. Very small DIY parade, but super impressive. They have created this new thing called Bean Coin. I'll tell you what it is in a second, but rest in peace, this place over here. This was the Blind Pelican. That is a pre-COVID closure. They were the home of the 25-cent oyster happy hour. There is no such thing anymore. So no historical plaque there, but mainly not because it's not important, just because we know it would make y'all way too jealous. Tacos and beer next door. Pretty good. You know exactly what you're getting. And this is also, this area is kind of a hub of East Asian food. A lot of sushi in this section here. Sushi Brothers in Hoshin. Fond memories of both of those places. So a bean coin, and this is something you may want to think about if you decide you want to pay a visit to New Orleans, or, you know, maybe even if not. It sounds like a cryptocurrency. It's not. But it is a way to buy a $10 bar tab at a New Orleans bar way in advance. And they get half the value of it right away. And then they get the other half when you show up. And this is sponsored by various companies that sell their beverages, let's call them that, in New Orleans bars. And plenty of these places are real institutions. We've had many tragic losses in New Orleans of service businesses of all kinds, but bars remain, they're kind of the last wave of opening, and live music, of course, coming late is a real staple, so that's a way to help. Lula Distillery, place to get a drink for a change. That is a restaurant that also is a micro distillery, and you can see all the big fancy equipment while you sit and dine or drink inside. So Bean Coin, crew of Red Beans, Krewe is how you spell crew in that context. Give it a little look up and they'll send you a glass coin made from recycled beer bottles. It is, as far as I know, guaranteed that each of those things was in contact with beer at one point. And it'll be a great conversation starter when you hit up a bartender in New Orleans at one of the participating bars. St. Charles Tavern, this is one of those losses of the last year. 24-hour joint at one time. I'm not going to tell you it was the absolute best restaurant in New Orleans, but it had lasted more than a century. So there's something to be admired and respected there. This whole section of St. Charles, you can see, is No mansions, not those few that still stand are converted. This was a section that, for a lot of reasons, had a lot of stuff torn down and new things built, Office Depot and the like, during various parts of the 20th century. So this is not nearly as historical looking a corridor. I think this may be a swing at the house float aesthetic on a Raising Cane's. So if y'all are gonna hit up fast food while you're in New Orleans, then Popeyes does come from here, but Raising Cane's has mostly stayed here. Solid competition either way. Still more sushi, Miyako. First place I ever tried sushi. And up ahead, y'all can see a bridge. That is the bridge to the Crescent City connection. It's part of it connects with our main interstate highway right over there to the left. So this today pretty effectively divides what we're in, which we'd call Uptown. It's an aggregation of lots of smaller neighborhoods, with what today we'd call downtown, whereas the line used to be Canal Street, the edge of the French Quarter, a good deal further up ahead. But when you have something quite as imposing of a barrier as that, it tends to turn into a dividing line. But it's an important little section of the city on the other side. The business district over there tends to be thought of a lot of the time as just where business travelers stay and where conventions happen, but there's some cool stuff there for sure. Definitely some history. Emerald's Delmonico, one of the 3 Emerald Lagasse restaurants around town. 1 here, 2 in the CBD up ahead. So one of your many dining options along St. Charles. We have not seen a whole lot of super New Orleans-y food on St. Charles, so Emerald's, absolute promise, no sushi on the menu. Watch them go and do like crawfish sushi or something like that. So we'll make a separate tour of the business district / warehouse district / American sector up ahead. But for the purposes of rounding this one out, we'll take a step under the bridge and give y'all a little taste of what once would have been not even the end of St. Charles Avenue. It extends all the way over to Canal Street, but what would have been a major intermission on the route, let's call it that. That is the spot we call the Circle. You can hear a whole lot of heys and hellos whenever you walk along in New Orleans, especially if you're carrying a camera and you have the power not to look at them. I'm not being sadistic, y'all. I'm not putting people's faces online against their will. This is, this looks like a church, and it is now, but this was built as a Shriner's temple. In the process of renovation, it's been serving homeless folks in the area for a good while. So look for this to possibly look a little different next time you come to town. And on the other side of the bridge, we have a couple more things that are not what they say they are. You just make out the top of the K&B sign on the modern looking building across the bridge. So K&B, y'all, was under the bridge. Here we are. This is a place in transition, y'all. A lot of stories in progress over here. So you can see on the side of this building, a piece of large sculptural art. This is a building called K&B Plaza. K&B was an old Louisiana, especially New Orleans, drugstore chain. And the B in that is Besthoff, if you know the Besthoff Sculpture Garden in City Park. The guy who, along with his wife, financed that and provided much of the art collection was Sidney Besthoff. So this was K&B's corporate headquarters. And like every local drugstore chain, they were bought out by one of the big ones. But Sidney Besthoff still owns the building. And it is office space for lots of different purposes these days. And you can really tell it's his by the presence of so much art around the space. And that big old guy there in the middle is a fountain sculpture by Isamu Noguchi. So art fans make a bit of a pilgrimage out of this spot. This is Lee Circle, and it is the home of a former monument to Robert E. Lee. So there's the pedestal and nothing else. And then over there, you can see one of the newer structures for the World War II Museum. So we're paying that a visit before too long. And here, another sad loss. This strange little sectioned off looking building is the Circle Bar. And this is a great little local dive bar music venue. It was sort of another COVID loss. Honestly, you know, the timeline on a lot of these things is hard to say, and oftentimes it just meant speeding up something that was going to happen anyway, or owners who had been in the business for a long time deciding now is the time to bow out. So if you were ever to take the St. Charles streetcar ride from the French Quarter, you'd be coming a few blocks over that way, looping around here, passing through this spot where the streetcar drivers hang out and chat, passing under this bridge, and then heading on to a little shy of where we started to see the Garden District. And I'm certainly going to recommend riding further than that because there are many beautiful things to see. As for the beauties and wonders of this neighborhood, we'll be making a separate exploration through those pretty soon. So, thanks for your time. If you'd like to tip, you'll find the information to do so down below, and let us know what about these things you'd like to know more of. See you soon.